there's this sense of emotional betrayal that so many employees feel because they're not seen. And we were kind of raised with this belief that if we do what the teacher tells us to do, we'll get the gold star. If we do what our parents tell us to do, we will become the favorite child and we will be recognized. So coming from that frame that if I do these things, people will see, so many people in the workplace never feel seen. And if you're not seen, you can't be appreciated. And people are like, I gave my all for the company. The company didn't see.
Hey guys, before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask of you. Can you please hit the subscribe button so that more people can find the show? Thank you. Laura, how would you describe the difference between burnout and betrayal?
They're very similar, but they also have very different root causes. Burnout is actually described as chronic workplace stress that has been unsuccessfully managed. So, it's stress. The cure for that is stress management. Whereas betrayal is defined as the breaking of an expectation that you have relied on that ruptures your view of yourself or the world. So, on one hand, you've got stress. On the other hand, you have a broken expectation. Now, very, very different, but the result is the same. The resulting emotions that come from that is disillusionment, burnout, sadness, all the things that we think of when we think about, oh, I'm really burned out.
So, people could be experiencing uh, in the workplace a sense of betrayal from a
Yes.
colleague, from a manager, or it could be in at home, they could feel betrayal from their partner, but they'll be experiencing symptoms and they could either be experiencing burnout and thinking that they were betrayed in some way, or they were betrayed in some way and they think that all this exhaustion, this feeling of disconnection is coming from burnout.
Exactly, exactly. When we are dissatisfied, we know we're dissatisfied. We're like, I hate my job. I hate my coworkers. I'm so frustrated with my family. And what do we say? We say, I'm so burned out. I'm so burned out. I'm so burned out. Then we go do a Google search or we try to figure something out and we find out things like meditation, mindfulness, yoga. We are given techniques that help us manage our stress, our level of stress. And it works. And maybe we do have a level of stress that we can't manage. But then the problem is it doesn't address that sense of betrayal. And until we identified, wow, I expected a promotion after so many years of service. I expected to be consulted about this. I expected to take credit for my own work. That's a sense of betrayal. So when we're feeling betrayed, mindfulness isn't going to help. Yoga isn't going to help. Those help reduce the level of stress. Those don't address those underlying feelings of betrayal that we might also be experiencing.
But all of those betrayals that you're experiencing, like, I thought I'd get more recognition for my work. I thought after all of these years of expertise, all of these years of service, I would get that promotion. All of these are like covert messages that you have in the back of your head, but you more than likely have not communicated them to your spouse or to your manager or to anyone in your team. That they're kind of
Ex-
expectations that are not being met, but also expectations that you have not clearly identified or set with anyone else. So you might be looking for them, but no one else is aware of what your expectations are.
Exactly, exactly. I always have people be aware of three things in my betrayal recovery work. When we talk about expectations, I say first and foremost, you need to identify what those expectations are. Because sometimes we aren't even consciously aware that we expect it. We just have grown up with this assumption that if I'm loyal to the company, it will be loyal to me. Or if I do my part, other people will see me and they will recognize me. There are these covert assumptions. So we have to, step one, identify them to ourselves and make ourselves aware. And when we do that, that's when we can start determining and ascertaining, Is this even a realistic expectation? Because so often we have these grand and glorious expectations. And then when we start identifying them to ourselves, then we can go, oh, that doesn't really make sense. That really doesn't make sense that I expected my partner to do all of these different things or my coworkers to do these things. And then we can kind of laugh at ourselves. But that is step one, is identifying what those expectations are. And then to your point, step two is communicating those expectations to the appropriate people, which is not grouching about them, but it's telling somebody, I have worked 60 hours of overtime in the last month. Because I have worked 60 hours of overtime in the last month, I have expected compensation for that. If I can't get compensation, I at least expect X, Y, and Z. And then the third step is advocating on behalf of your expectations, because sometimes it's not good enough just to identify and to communicate. We have to advocate. Why do I deserve this? What will the company get? How can our relationship be better? How will this move all of us forward?
Because I see that a lot in burnout, where people overexert or overextend themselves in the hope of getting reciprocated in some way or validated in some way, but not communicating it. And then when it comes to them saying, oh, you need to make a case for it, they shy away and be like, oh, no, I don't feel like I can approach my manager and say these things because I modeled myself as the hard worker. And if I look for kind of tit for tat, I'll feel like I'll be lesser than. And all of this is just narratives within their own head, holding themselves back, even though they have those higher expectations, again, with the narrative in their head, never communicating these expectations, but always having this expectation of themselves, and always telling themselves as well that I think the primary narrative that's kind of like the umbrella over all of this is the you'll never be good enough or you'll never be recognized for all of your efforts. And it's kind of like this shame or guilt that hangs over them. So even though they want those expectations to be met, they feel that they will never be met anyway. They'll always kind of hold themselves back. And
Yes.
that's the kind of the paradigm of it, is that they want those expectations to be met, but at the same time, they don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you went there, because you're right. It's this constant push-pull dynamic of, I want this, but if I get it, I'm afraid that I have to rise to a new level, or different things will be expected of me, or just I'm stepping into something that I don't know. We like doing what we're good at. Learning new things is stressful. It's hard. And if we advocate on behalf of ourselves for change and we get that change, it means we have to change too. And most of us, you're right, simultaneously want change and are very afraid of it as well.
So when we have these expectations, as you said, when some of them are realistic and some of them are idealistic, like you mentioned that some of them we might be very aware as soon as we identify them, we'll be like, okay, that's a realistic expectation. That's part of my progress ladder. But then others might be a bit more outlandish, but they
Mhm.
might not seem outlandish in the moment. Is it only by identifying them and kind of speaking them out loud? Is that the best way of recognizing them for what they are, and whether they're idealistic or realistic expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I always do make that distinction between the idealistic and the realistic expectations. And here's how that plays out. When you start communicating something, when you identify it and then start communicating, it helps you to start unpacking it for yourself. An example that I gave in my book and that I always talk about, like during my keynote and when I'm doing workshops and things like that, is I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. And that was this whole big women can do it all, you can have it all, you can do it all. And that was the narrative, going back to what you said about narratives, that was the narrative in my head. I can do it all. I can be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, I can run a company, I can do everything all at the same time. And I believed that at my core. And that was also the message that I had been given. So I think other people believe that as well. And as I started speaking it, as I had 2 kids under 2 and was working full time, and my husband had a job in another state, and 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were in hospice and were in some phase of dying, and I had a 30 to 40-minute commute each way, and it started crumbling in on me. As I was able to start communicating, that's when it started dawning on me, "Whoa, this narrative that I have been fed is not true. I have believed it and I have identified and communicated and asked for things, but it's not realistic." And it wasn't until I got my feet wet and started living it a little bit did I start realizing, no, it's not just better scheduling. I can get up at 5 in the morning and I can do all of these things, but I can't live on 4 hours of sleep. I can't schedule myself back to back and have zero downtime. The application is not there, and that is not realistic. So, yes, identify, communicate, but then sometimes you have to live it a little bit too and say, does this work for me? Maybe there's some women out there, maybe there's some men out there that can function on 4 hours of sleep with zero downtime. That's not me. That's not realistic for me.
So even when you had that narrative, did you feel that, because you had the freedom to do everything? I think it comes back to towards the quote. It's like we have the freedom to do anything we want, but not everything. That
Yes.
we can do anything, but we can't do everything at the same time. So when
Yes.
you had the narrative that you could do everything, did you feel that was a sense of betrayal to yourself? That
Yes.
because you wanted to do everything, but your capacity would not let you, did you feel that your
Yes.
capacity was betraying you?
Yes, that's exactly it. And going to the definition of betrayal, the breaking of an expectation. My expectation was I could do it all at the same time, and my life would be perfect. So that was my expectation. When it was broken, my initial response was not, oh, the narrative is wrong. My initial response was, what am I doing wrong? I internalized that. I must not be good enough. I must not be smart enough. I must not be trying enough. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with my marriage? What's wrong with my kids? What's wrong with my career? And then I started poking on all those outside things because I kept thinking, I'm trying really hard. I thought I was smart. I thought I was good. And it took a while to reconcile all of that inside of me. And I think that's something that is really important to talk about too. This work, burnout, betrayal, figuring it out, it's a process. Like listeners might be saying, oh my gosh, it is betrayal. It does feel like a sense of betrayal. And I get that. But then you have to think it, you have to live it, you have to let it process. It's not like you just fix it on a Thursday morning and on Friday you wake up and everything's different.
Yeah, that was a lot for me when I first burnt out. It was like, oh, this is an overnight fix. Was the narrative that I had behind it, and it was like, okay, you're getting. I was given 4 weeks off work, and I was like, okay, you have 4 weeks to get out of this burnout thing and get back to normal, and that was how it was treated. That's what I was told to do. So I was like, okay, this is what it is. It's a quick overnight fix, and then I go back to normal. But my normal was that narrative that got me burnt out in the first place.
Yes.
And that's what would needed to change. And
Yes.
none of that had been brought to the table when I first burnt out. The narrative had been, oh, you just need to fix this and you'll go back to normal. Not whatever got you here made you burn out. So something has to change. Whatever system or framework or loop you are currently in needs to change so that this doesn't happen again. So I think that's how we have
Yes.
to, as you said, with burnout and betrayal, we need to change the framework that we use so that we
Mhm.
don't end up there again.
Yes. And in terms of that framework also, yes, sometimes we can recognize, I feel like the company is betraying me. I feel like these policies are betraying me. But one level deeper is how am I betraying myself? How am I not giving myself the number of hours of sleep that make me feel refreshed in the morning? How am I not eating healthily? How am I not having friendships and a life? Because nobody else is going to advocate for you. Nobody else is going to make sure you are well fed, that you're going to bed on time, that you're happy. That's your job. And we are all so focused on get the gold star, focus on that external validation, get the next promotion, get the next raise. And that's kind of what you were talking about. Like, keep moving forward, fix it for a little bit, then go back to normal. No, normal is about not betraying yourself. Normal is about creating a life that works for you. And it's not a career limiting thing either. Sometimes people are like, well, you don't understand my job. No, I don't understand your job. But I also know I was a corporate attorney. That's an intense job. I can make that work for me in different ways. And it is up to me to take care of myself and to set boundaries that make me my best person so I can stay in my career for the long haul, so I can be effective.
Yes, that's where things get a little sticky for some people, is where they when they burn out and they blame it all on their boss. The big bad boss burned me out, so I need to change companies. Next thing, they change companies and the same thing happens again. Oh, I just had another toxic boss. But the same thing, they had not set any boundaries with themselves. They went back into the same behaviors of trying to overcompensate or overexert themselves and prove themselves in this new role.
Mhm.
And next thing they realize, oh, well, I was able to do 16-hour shifts in my last job. So I did 16-hour shifts in this job. And the same thing happens again. And then when it comes to everything falling apart, they say, well, I didn't have time to eat or sleep, or weekends, I was always doing more extra project work. And next thing, when their boss turns around and says, well, I never asked you to do any of that, you should have been taking care of yourself. That was a sense of betrayal for them.
Yes. Yes. The three filter questions that I always have people ask are you seeking to please? Are you striving to conform? Or are you trying to outperform? Because some people, yes, they're people pleasers. Most people do try to please. We try to please our boss. We try to please our coworkers. We try to please our partners. At whose expense? It's not that you can't please somebody, but if I am constantly seeking to please and I am putting myself last, I'm going to feel betrayed. I'm going to feel resentful, and it's not going to be healthy. Same thing with conforming. Am I trying to conform to what everybody else does? Again, maybe you don't need as much sleep as I do. Maybe you don't need a walk in the afternoon. I cannot conform to other people. Are you trying to conform? And then the last thing, performing. There is such a difference between doing your job and being who you are and performing. And if you find yourself trying to perform, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, same thing, it's going to wear you out. So always ask yourself, am I seeking to please, conform, or perform? And if the answer is yes, how can you drop in? How can you ground? How can you stop? And how can you be you? Because I also guarantee your knowledge, your skills, your experience is going to be way more valuable than just trying to please, conform, or perform.
Even that note of how do you try to be you? I can guarantee about 90% of people have never asked themselves that question because they don't want to know themselves. They're comfortable stuck in that work loop. They can
Yes.
immerse themselves in the work. They can feel validated. They can feel that sense of success. But to know themselves and check, are they really aligned with the work that they're doing? Is it really serving them in the long term? That's a much more raw and uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
So if someone brings that up, how to be you, where would you get them to start to really understand who they are?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions, and it's so simple, but it's so hard, is how would you introduce yourself if you could not say your job title, your relationship status, your religion, your political affiliation, the amount of money that you had? How would you introduce yourself as a person just based on who you are with no external markers. And it's hard, and try it. Try it with a friend. Try it with, even if you're speaking it out loud to yourself. Hi, I'm Laura. And it's like all of these things start going through your head. And it's like, I'm a joyful person. I am an animal lover. I love to move. It takes a while to start reconnecting with who you are external of your labels, your roles, your scripts. And that's your identity. That's who you are. And those are the gifts that you bring to relationships, to the workplace. But yes, we get lost and we forget who we are.
I love that because a lot of people attach their identity to their job title. And I remember in an old job that someone had identified themselves as, they paraphrased on their job title to make it sound a bit more interesting, but it identified a bit more with themselves. And as soon as they said, "Oh, this is what I do," and a manager pulled them aside and said, "That's not what it says on your working contract," and it was just so close-minded. It was so close-minded, and I was like, essentially, it's the same thing.
Yes.
Essentially, they changed something. Instead of saying they were technician, they said analyst, and they felt, because I like analyzing things, and then they're like, "No, no, on your contract it says you're a technician." So you better change that. Don't be telling people you're an analyst. And it was just so close-minded. But it was having that identity to your working title that someone else chose for you, rather than who are you as a person. If you didn't have that job, if you didn't have your education, if you weren't raised a certain way, how are you experiencing life right now? What makes you feel alive?
Yeah. And also connecting into your why. I practiced law for 10 years and then I did leave the practice of law. And I had a bit of an identity crisis there too, because, well, if I can't say that I'm a lawyer, who am I? And I started thinking, why did I go to law school? I went to law school because I was passionate about justice. I am an advocate for justice. It doesn't matter what my job title says. Whether I'm coaching, whether I'm consulting, whether I'm a lawyer, I live my life trying to advocate for what's right. So, like that with the analyst, with the whatever, if you can drop into your why do I do this? Because I love analyzing things, because I love putting things into a new framework, because I love structure. I love organizing and translating things in a way that other people can read. I'm a clarity monster. Whatever it is that you can come up with yourself, why is it that you're doing that? Then that also inspires creativity and it keeps you motivated because it matters. Clarity matters. Being able to translate data, that matters. Focus on your why.
So the way that this identifying betrayal in the workplace, when it comes to, let's say, having a conversation between employees and managers, in trying to set expectations, how,
Yes.
coming from, let's say, we'll start with managers, it has to come from the top down, really. I think that's the way it should be, from the top down. They want to set clear expectations of what they expect from the role in terms of KPIs, in terms of
Yes.
company culture. This needs to be set from the top down. It's already a problem if it has to come from the bottom up, because that means there's already disgruntlement, resentment, and everything coming from lower down, because
Yes.
whatever was promised from higher up is not being met. There's already a sense of betrayal. So if it's coming from lower down, they're trying to solve the problem in some way. But in terms of trying to prevent that burnout or betrayal from beginning in the first place, it needs to come from higher up. How to set those expectations? Are those expectations individual to department, to manager, or should they all be aligned with the, let's say, the company vision?
In an ideal situation, the entire company would be in alignment, so everybody would know. But realistically, that doesn't always happen. Something that I have advised when I've consulted is when you're setting expectations, A really powerful way to do it is to say the yes and the no. These are our KPIs. We need this number. This is not what we need. And sometimes it sounds redundant, but it's also really important to let people know on both sides, because sometimes when you speak the inverse, then people will say, oh, that's not exactly what I meant. If it's meeting a certain dollar amount, if it's meeting a certain numbers, if it's working a certain hours, it's important to say, like, in our company, we do not pay for overtime. There is no overtime. We do not do overtime. However, in the event that we need it, we will communicate to you, and then you will get paid X amount for that. And it sounds redundant, but the thing is, people all think differently and people all make assumptions. So when you're explaining what those expectations are, whether it's at the very top, mid-level, or lower, if you speak on both sides of them, it helps bring things into alignment.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of clarity needs to be brought. I think that's a good example of overtime, where it's like, oh, as a company, we do not do overtime. However, in urgent cases, it can be negotiated.
Yes.
If we it's an emergency situation, we're not going to say like, oh, we need someone to come in and do an all nighter to meet this project. Of course, we're going to compensate that. But if they keep it as very as black and white as no overtime, no compensation, no one's going to come in. But if there it does, yeah, as you said, it doesn't make the first point redundant by saying, look, as a general rule, overtime is not it is overtime is not allowed. So they don't expect people to stay over hours. They're like, no, look,
Mm-hmm.
these are your working hours. We don't expect you to stay any longer because you won't be paid for it. However,
Mm-hmm.
in urgent cases, which will of course be communicated in advance, it can be
Yes.
negotiated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Similarly, like from COVID, working from home. Once the, lockdown was lifted, once people could go back to work, there was a lot of confusion. Do I go back to work? What does it mean to be hybrid? Hybrid what? Hybrid how? Hybrid when? How do we communicate that? And the clearer the expectations, the more beneficial it is for both management, for employees, for leaders, for everybody. Because if I'm leading a team, how can I communicate it to my team unless I am abundantly clear? And that's why we get those feelings of betrayal. Well, my manager told me this. And then the manager's like, well, yeah, but my boss told me this. And they're like, well, yeah, but the board told me this. And then it's just people start getting disgruntled and feeling resentful. So err on the side of excessive communication. Because, like I said earlier, we all have assumptions about what this means. What hybrid means to me is very different than what a hybrid work environment might mean to you.
Yeah. So it's really getting clear on it. It almost feels like when you say it out loud, it's like we need to get better communicating between management and employees. And as soon as you
Yes.
say that, we're like, well, of course, communication is important. Of course, like everything needs to be communicated, but it still doesn't happen. There, everyone jumps to conclusions or makes assumptions, or managers to say, oh, I expect my employees to know the difference between hybrid working and remote working. And they should know what is expected of them, but don't pass any communication on. And then the manager doesn't get his expectations met when he's like, oh, I thought my employees would all be in the office today and half of them are at home. And that's an unmet expectation for him.
Hmm. Hmm. What I also tell people often is advocacy really boils down to two things. It boils down to I statements and boundaries. And this is effective communication, owning what you will or will not do. I expect, I want, I need, I am going to. When you, whether you're a manager or an employee, can let people know where you stand, it helps people know where they stand. Instead of you need to work these hours and you need to do this over here and you need, Let people know where you stand. I will leave the room if voices get raised because I don't do well with that. I need to close out my desk at the end of every day with all of your workflow coming to me by 5 o'clock because I will be leaving at 5 o'clock. When you let people know where you stand, it helps them. And that creates a better boundary with communication too, so everybody can get their needs met. If I tell my team, I need all of your workflow on my desk in my inbox by 5 o'clock because I am leaving, then if somebody else does have a legitimate problem, then they can come to me. They know my expectations, they know where I stand, and they can say, in this case, I am still waiting on the information from, it looks like it's going to be more like 6 o'clock or until tomorrow, and then we can figure it out. It's not that we're negotiating everything, we're solving problems. I tell you where I stand. If you can't meet that need, you tell me and we figure it out.
I love that. There's actually a workshop I do in for alignment, and it's all about expectations. And we get everyone to do what, based on all the roles that are within the team, to say, okay, what is expected of your role? And list out the expectations. Okay, what do you expect of this other person's role within the team? And get them to write out all the expectations. Then they pass them over to the other person who works in that role. And next thing they're like, why do you expect me to
Wait,
do that? So it's the individual team members. It's kind of like there was a game we played in school where you fold down the piece of paper and write a line of a story and then fold it over and the next person writes the next line. So it's like that. And next thing you open it out and it's like, why would you write that? It's like, this makes
yeah,
no sense. And next thing you realize, everyone is out of alignment of what they expect within the team. And it's like, okay,
yes,
this is what, if this person didn't communicate this with you today, this is what they would expect of you. And that communication or that expectation would never be met. So you get
yes,
everyone to write out their expectations. Okay, this is what I expected. Well, this is what's defined in my contract. So this is what's going to be done. All of these expectations will be unmet. And then at the end of it, it's like, these are all the expectations that will not be met. Do we need to redefine and say who's going to meet these expectations? Or do we say or clarify where else do we go to get those expectations? Is it in a different department? Do we outsource? And then
yes,
once that's all addressed, that clears up so much of a bottleneck of expectations that are not being met, people waiting for those expectations to be met, and a project just like at standstill. And then, of course, a manager is not seeing their project progress, and his
right.
expectation of the project is not being met because this person is waiting for an expectation that will never move forward. And that,
Yeah.
so it's funny how like that's a high performance workshop on what do you expect of yourself and what do you expect of your teammates.
Hmm.
And it's something that just gets overlooked because of assumptions and
Yes.
covert expectations.
Yeah. That sounds like such a great workshop because you're right. We all think it's so easy. I'm hiring someone to fill this role. It's so easy, but it's just not. It's just not. And a distinction that I want to make around expectations too. Broken expectations can lead to frustration, and broken expectations can lead to a sense of burnout, or I mean, a sense of betrayal. And it's important to distinguish between the two of those because a broken expectation is frustrating. A broken expectation is irritating. But when it ruptures your view of yourself or the way your career should be, that's when it leads to that sense of betrayal. And it's important to be, I think, aware of that whole range. I can deal with little frustrations along the way. But when I start internalizing, when I start getting really negative and thinking, I just hate this and this person's stupid and I'm never going to do that, that's some very toxic thinking. Frustration is okay. We can increase our resilience. We can broaden our window of tolerance. We can have frustration, but be mindful of when it's really starting to go into, I'm not good enough. I'm stupid. I hate them. This dang job. Be mindful of where it's going. So, to your point, you can start changing the way that you show up permanently. so you can start living and working permanently in a better, healthier state.
I love that. I think that it getting clear on the difference between the frustrations
Mhm.
and being betrayed.
Yes.
That it's kind of like when people confuse getting stressed out as or having a mild exhaustion and burnout. I
Yeah.
remember when I first told people I was burnt out, they were like, "Oh, I get burnt out every Tuesday, but I'm okay again by Thursday." And it's like, no, I think what you have is like a really bad hangover from the weekend, and of course you're fine by Thursday because you can't wait for Friday night.
Yes.
And it was kind of the not understanding the full concept, but always thinking that, oh, it must be the worst, that they, again, as you said, the frustration, that they'd be like, oh, this must be as bad as it gets, or this is why is my vocabulary just not working? This, like, as in this is you pushing the limit, rather
Yes.
than accepting it as, I think it's when it comes to our emotions that we always look at the, like, the primary emotion, but not how we're feeling it. It's like when you say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm sad." It's like, but what's making you sad? You're sad. Why? Is are you depressed, or do you feel let down, or what? Let's say branch of sadness is it? Is it real? Is it? Are you sure it's sadness, or is it anger? Is it frustration? And I think it's
Right.
understanding the underlying emotion for what it is, and then understanding how you can process it. If you misdiagnose yourself, it's hard to process that emotion.
Yes. Yes. I appreciate that because the umbrella is wellness. And we are not going to be perfectly happy in all facets of life all the time. It's the umbrella of wellness. How do I manage the small frustrations? How do I know when this truly is a toxic workplace and I have done all my tools? I have identified, communicated, and advocated for on behalf of myself. I have used I statements. I have set clear boundaries. I have communicated my boundaries to other. Like there is a point where it is a toxic workplace and you do need to leave for your own mental health. But it's that awareness of what are the tools that I can use? Is this just a tough time? Are we going through a corporate merger right now and everybody has to lean in? What is this really? Zooming out, how am I keeping my wellness? How am I keeping my mental well-being? Is this the place for me? And then making decisions based on that instead of some knee-jerk reactions along the way and realizing I've tolerated something that I shouldn't have tolerated for far too many years and now I'm stuck. Or to your point earlier, I keep career hopping and then the same thing happens in every single job. It's that balance, that self-reflection, that looking at others, zooming in, zooming out. And it is important because it is our well-being. It is our life. It is the way we feel. And like that, I want to mostly feel good. Mostly, we should all be feeling good. So what's under that? What's stopping you from mostly feeling good and feeling satisfied in your career and in your life? And how can we address those underlying things that are getting in the way?
Yeah, it always comes back to our sense of self, where we feel that others need to meet all of our expectations. But if we don't understand what we're looking for, or our own capacity, and hoping that, oh, if I just overextend myself, someone will come and help me and support me,
Yeah.
and just hoping that someone else will figure this out for you. If you put in the hours, if you put in the effort, someone else will figure everything out for you. You're going to be disappointed.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Always, always, always. And something else I want to say, and I know you appreciate this too. My IP is all around fuel up, and fuel up is an acronym, and we've talked about most of them. F stands for find your why. Why do you do what you do? What makes you, happy? U is the unbroken or the uncovering what's really going on, just like what you were talking about, uncovering what's really causing those emotions. E is the expectation management. We talked a lot about that. But the L in fuel up stands for laughter. And I feel like I'd be remiss if I don't bring that up. Life is meant to be joyful, and laughter is the number one way to calm and re regulate the nervous system. And that's one of those things that when we go to work, we have this mindset that work is serious, that my career is serious, that I have to prove my worth. And if we can all drop into a sense of laughter, not making fun of each other, but just laughter. Oh, there was a mistake that happened. Oh, there was a miscommunication. And laugh about it instead of lean into that blame and that shame, it makes us healthier and it also creates a much healthier work environment because it does calm and re-regulate the nervous system. It does broaden the level of acceptance, and it just helps everybody have a better time. And it can sound very trivial, but laughter is a really, really important tool. And how can you use that tool every day, especially when times are bad?
It's one of my favorite, even as breath work, to use like laughter yoga, because it's like there's no better way to cheer yourself up, even if it's purely psychological. It's
Yes.
to laugh, because you're going to get yourself in a better mood anyway, and you're probably going to approach everything from a completely different perspective if you just had a good belly laugh before approaching the project, rather than, as you said, kind of a blame and shame and name before approaching it and being like, okay, what do we do now after blaming everyone else around you?
Yeah.
That having just that lighter moment, it brings fun, and it kind of again, it opens up the creative side of your brain. Once you've had a good laugh, once you've kind of had that, it's kind of like a catharsis in a way, that
Yes.
you haven't made light of a serious situation, but you've looked at the lighter side of the situation and been like,
Yes.
okay, someone, okay, this was a bit of a mess up. Have a laugh about it, and just make light and be like, okay, but now we really need to get down to business and make sure this doesn't happen again. And there's no
Hmm.
better way of connecting with people through laughter. It makes you warmer and easier to approach. Not this like
Yes.
manic laughter of a crazy scientist, but it's like, okay, look, have a quick laugh about it and be like, okay, this is something we don't want happening around here. But
Yeah.
on a more serious note, how do we work together to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Exactly.
So it's
Just like
it's
you were talking about with the expectations and the game with writing a sentence on the story. It's funny. I mean, really, it is comical. If I have these expectations and you have those expectations and we put them up together, that is worthy of a laugh. Oh my gosh, we were on completely different pages. We were in completely different books. Ha ha ha. Now how do we figure that out? And one of the tools that I really love recommending to people is training your brain. Our brains are designed to look for things that are threatening because it keeps us safe. So my brain is constantly scanning the environment looking for things that are wrong, which is great if we're in an environment where we need to keep ourselves physically safe. But it is not such a great thing if we're trying to create relationships, if we're trying to have move projects forward. So if you can start training your brain to look for 5 positive things at work every day, it helps you start seeing the lighter side of things. It helps you start seeing what's going right instead of what's going wrong. It helps you praise people to success. So my challenge to anybody listening to this is to start right now. Look for 5 things a day that you like, that you find funny, that are going well, and comment on them. Comment on them. Wow, this looks great. Holy cow, we beat our numbers on this one. You look really happy today. It was really fun to see that smile. I'm feeling great today. Whatever it is, beautiful sunny weather. Just notice and comment on 5 things a day that are going right, that are positive, and it's gonna change your mindset, and it's also, like you were saying, it's gonna change the mindset of people around you, and there will be more willing to help you out too, because let's face it, we will work harder for people that make us feel good than we will for people that are constantly breathing down our necks.
I love that. It reminds me of one of my concepts that I help people with making small changes in their day. And it's like
Yeah.
it has to be something that is so simple that it almost feels more effort not to do. And it's starting your day with a smile. You go to the bathroom mirror and you smile.
Yeah.
So your win is that you smiling, and your second win is that someone has smiled back already, and it's your reflection. Now, if you decide to smile any time else in the day, that's a bonus. But you've already
Yeah.
started your day with a smile. So it makes the effort of a second smile or a third smile less resistant. You've already overcome that obstacle. Now, if you get into the habit of smiling more, either to your partner or to your dog or to your work colleague, you're probably going to get more smiles back. Just as a reaction, if you smile at someone, they're more likely to smile back. And now, if you start
Yes.
smiling more in your day, you're probably going to have a more positive day. And people who were less likely to approach you, if they see you as like, oh, he started off his day with a smile, he was very approachable. I feel more comfortable going to him to ask him a question or to alleviate a problem or to approach him about a challenge I'm having. That if we can make ourselves more approachable just by starting our day with a smile.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And I love it in the mirror too, because loneliness is kind of at an epidemic level of as we have all heard. And just making that eye contact with yourself in the mirror, yes, it's you, but it's still our brain registers it as another person. And that's powerful. That's really powerful. So I love that tool as well. Because again, life is meant to be enjoyable. It is meant to be fun. How can we make it more fun, stay more connected? Because we get more done when we're connected and having fun. We just do.
So so far we got the fuel of fuel up. So what's the up?
The up and fuel up, and we touched on this as well too. It stands for unbroken promises to yourself. Because if you're like me, you will keep promises to other people, but it's so easy to break promises to yourself. Whether it's getting up before to work out, whether it's reading motivational quotes, whether it's eating healthy, whether it's not biting your nails, we break promises to ourselves all the time. And here's the thing, if somebody else broke promises to you at the rate that you break them to yourself, would you even want to be friends with them? Probably not. And if you have your own back, no matter what happens around you, you truly know that you can keep yourself safe. So if the company does let you go, what are the things that you can do to have your own back? What are the things that you can do to keep yourself healthy? And it also helps in a relational context at work. If I am very clear at keeping promises to myself, I'm going to keep meetings at 50 minutes. At 50 minutes, we're done. We're not going over. It makes me a more trustworthy leader as well. Because if I'm not going to let you down if I'm not letting me down. So it's a very strong leadership skill. If I say I'm going on a 15-minute walk at lunch, I do it. Things can adjust around me. I am important enough to prioritize myself. It's good for me and it's good for everybody in my vortex who is dealing with me because again, they know how where they stand because they know exactly what I'm going to do.
That you touched on an aspect there of um, people breaking those promises themselves, but they'd have those same expectations of their work or maybe their relationship with their partner that needs to fulfill those expectations that they will let themselves down, but they expect their partner or their company not to let them down. So
Yes.
when as you mentioned there about being able to rely on yourself if you were to lose your relationship or to lose your job, can you
Hmm.
fall back on yourself?
Yes.
And there are those people who cannot rely on themselves that feel once they lose their job, everything has been taken away from them. Or once a
Yes.
relationship breaks up, that person has taken away all of their security and trust and ability to go to the gym And I built my routine all around this person, and now that they're gone, everything has fallen apart. Or, oh, I built
Hmm.
my whole routine, everything was built around this job. This job was everything to me. And once that's
Yes.
taken apart or taken away from them, they feel, oh, there's nothing left. I have no nothing to fall back on, because
Yes.
they haven't built that level of trust with themselves. So that's, in a way, them betraying themselves.
100%. 100%. And that also goes back to what we were talking about, identity. I have to be me for me. I have to fulfill my own needs for me. And it doesn't mean that I am a lone wolf and that I'm not connecting to anybody. I can still stay connected. I can be like, hey, Eugene, help me with this. I really need to take a 15-minute walk every day at lunch, and I'm having a hard time breaking away. I know that you're interested in that too. Let's hold each other accountable. Get an accountability buddy. Hire a coach. Just talk to somebody, a friend, a coworker, but do something to help you stay accountable to yourself. Because if you refuse to betray yourself, you are going to more easily identify the external betrayal that is coming in around you, and you will be much more likely to advocate on behalf of yourself. Because if I don't tolerate it from me, I'm not going to tolerate it from you either. And I'm going to be much more comfortable speaking up and saying, I'm so happy that you shared that idea. If you recall, that was the idea that I proposed in last week's meeting. I love that you were able to expand on that idea, but this is originally my idea, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. Because I've got my own back, I'm going to advocate. I'm not going to go back and start complaining. My coworker is stealing my idea. Oh my gosh, now she's going to get promoted. Blah, blah, blah. I'm clear. It's not a big deal. I know who I am. I know what I do, and I know how to communicate that in a way that serves and honors me, which ultimately also serves and honors other people. I see that you expanded my original idea. That's brilliant. I brought step A to the puzzle. You did step B. Who's got step C? It makes us a team, and it makes us safe, and it allows us to all come forward and share all of our wisdom.
I love that, because so quickly people will always jump to the, hey, you're stealing my idea. Oh, that was my idea. Rather than letting someone else build on it. Or
Yes.
people are like, oh, like it's you're taking away my identity, or you're taking away all of my effort, rather than being like, oh, let's collaborate on this. Let's bring our opinions together.
Yes.
It's not about compromising or competing. It's about collaborating, which a lot of people forget at the end of the day, that they're not competing with their team members, they're co-workers.
Yes. Yes. And just imagine what your workplace would be like if every person was very clear on their identity, if every person was very clear on their boundaries, and if everybody could bring their ideas forward in a very clear way because they all had their own backs. A much different experience than everybody trying to tear other people down or wanting to get validation from somebody else or trying to please conform and perform. And that just implodes the energy instead of expands and grows the energy.
What do you think is the greatest betrayal in the workplace as you see it now? Where do you feel that people feel the most betrayed?
Oh, that's a really, really good question because I see it on a couple of different levels. I think there's this sense of emotional betrayal that so many employees feel because they're not seen. And we were kind of raised with this belief that if we do what the teacher tells us to do, we'll get the gold star. If we do what our parents tell us to do, we will become the favorite child and we will be recognized. So coming from that frame that if I do these things, people will see, so many people in the workplace never feel seen. And if you're not seen, you can't be appreciated. And people are like, I gave my all for the company. The company didn't see. And it's not that they didn't see because you didn't do it right. It's that it's not their job to see. And people feel so awkward advocating on behalf of themselves, but it's helpful. If you're going into your annual review, people will be like, oh, well, people just know what I've done. My boss just sees how hard I try. They don't. And I feel like that's one of the biggest betrayals is just that emotional people don't feel seen. And then when they don't feel seen, they don't feel valued. And then they put this spin, well, the company is doing this to me. The company is not doing anything to you. The company is a thing, it's not a person. Your boss is a person. Your coworker are people, but they're so focused on themselves that they're not focused on you. In the same way you're so focused on yourself, you're probably not focused on what everybody else does too. So advocate for yourself clearly, communicate clearly what you want, what you expect, so you feel seen, so you can be recognized in the way that you want to be recognized. So to answer your question, I feel like the biggest betrayal is a lack of recognition.
Laura, thank you so much. What's the best place for people to find you, to get in touch with you? What's the one place where they can where you hang out the most?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I do hang out on LinkedIn, but I really recommend you go to my website, burnout or betrayal.com. You can download a guide that will help you distinguish between burnout or betrayal and just take some of these concepts a little bit deeper because it is a process. So download the guide, work with it in yourself and reach out if you want more support.